The sudden quiet was suffocating. 80 co-workers stared down at their notebooks as Reed positioned himself at the front of the conference room, directing attention to my name on his restructuring slide. "Honestly, your role is outdated," he declared, his voice bouncing off the glass walls. "We're moving ahead with younger talent." I sat, unmoving. 23 years of loyal work erased in barely 15 seconds. My chest constricted as if someone had cinched metal wire around my ribs and kept twisting. "Crafting luxury pieces by hand is impractical," Reed went on, waving toward his projected charts with polished fingers that had never produced anything besides presentations. "Our new automated lines will boost output by 300%. Artisans like you belong to our past, not our direction forward." Heat crept up my neck. 23 years. I'd begun when this company created just 12 bespoke items a year. Now we produced thousands, each still carrying the subtle traces of human touch. My touch. The quarterly staff meeting had morphed into my public execution. People pretended to read their notes, refusing to look up. I searched the room for allies among faces I'd guided, coached, even hired. Not one lifted their eyes. "We'll be shifting your remaining team members into support roles for the upgraded production system," Reed said, advancing to the next slide. "Your last day will be Friday." I clutched the sides of my chair, knuckles pale. This was real. Truly real. Then a chair scraped across the floor at the back of the room. Every head swiveled as an elderly man gradually rose, the founder, who hadn't attended a staff meeting in years. Leaning heavily on his cane, he cleared his throat. "Do you have any idea who you're addressing?" His voice was soft, but unmistakable. Reed tugged at his tie. "Sir, with all due respect, I understand the nostalgia, but 3 decades ago," the founder cut in, "when I lost everything to a warehouse fire, this woman worked without wages for 8 months. She slept on my workshop floor. When buyers deserted us, her artistry brought them back. I remembered those bleak months, the fear, the doubt." "But that was then," Reed objected. "Markets change." The founder shuffled forward. "Last month, when the Sultan demanded 30 custom pieces in 2 weeks, who finished that impossible request?" Reed hesitated. "That was unusual circumstance." "And when the First Lady's accessory ripped minutes before a state event, who repaired it so flawlessly no one detected it?" "Wait. That's not what happened." That was the version that played in my imagination as Reed kept talking, detailing how my entire division would be dissolved, how the heritage methods would survive only as marketing props. What actually happened was far more painful. No one stood up. No one stood up for me. The founder wasn't even present. And I sat there quietly, my face burning as 2 decades of mastery were wiped away in a 15-minute slideshow. I want to ask you something. Have you ever had that moment where everything you've built collapses right in front of you? When you're made to feel insignificant in front of the very people whose respect you earned? If any part of this story hits home, press that like button and subscribe to hear what unfolded next, because what I did rewrote everything. My name is Willa. I'm 53 years old, and up until that meeting, I served as the head artisan at one of the most renowned luxury goods companies on the planet. Not that you'd guess it by looking at me. I don't wear designer outfits or drive anything flashy. What I possess are hands that can recognize materials by feel alone, eyes trained to detect flaws invisible to most, and patience carved out over 23 years of perfecting my art. I began as an apprentice back when everything was created manually, when each piece demanded weeks, not hours, when clients waited months for items meant to outlive generations. Reed had arrived 6 months earlier, armed with degrees and data models. He had never crafted a single thing with his own hands. At 36, he was ambitious, dangerously so, and he had the full attention of our CEO, Preston. After the meeting, I walked back to my workshop alone. My team avoided my gaze, terrified they'd be next on his list. The restructuring would begin the following Monday. My new title would be Heritage Consultant, a hollow label with half my salary and none of my former influence. I sat at my workbench, fingers drifting over the tools I had relied on for decades. Each worn handle had shaped countless works of art, each held stories in its wooden grain. "I need the keys to the archive," a voice cut in. Elisa, Reed's assistant, stood in my doorway. Early 20s, sharp, and entirely devoted to the new direction. "The archive stays locked for a reason," I replied without lifting my head. "Those are prototype designs spanning 80 years. Reed wants everything digitized by next week," she said, hand extended toward me. "The archive, your templates, all of it." "Those patterns were crafted by hand," I said. "Many don't even have written guides. They need skilled interpretation." "We'll figure it out," she replied with the certainty of someone who's never failed at anything of real consequence. "The keys, please." I handed them to her, watching as she walked off, already tapping away on her phone. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I kept seeing Reed's expression as he said obsolete, as if I were a malfunctioning device. Not a human being who had given her life to this company, not someone who had skipped family events to meet impossible deadlines, not the mentor who had trained dozens of artisans now working for our competitors. By dawn, my mind was made up. If they wanted me out, I would leave. But not like this. Not erased, not diminished. I arrived early before the cleaning crew had even wrapped up. My workshop was already half stripped. My tools were stacked in boxes marked Heritage Archive. The machines meant to replace us word in the next room, their operators still learning the basics. I checked my watch. I had 30 minutes before anyone else showed up. Opening my personal cabinet, I took out a small wooden box that held the tools my mentor gifted me when I completed my apprenticeship. Tools older than the company itself. These, they could never take from me. As I shut the cabinet, a shadow stretched across the doorway. "You're early," Reed said, leaning against the frame, bidding farewell to the old ways. I met his stare without flinching. Something like that. He stepped inside, glancing around with the look of someone surveying an ancient artifact. Mild curiosity layered with the quiet certainty that nothing here mattered in a modern world. "I hope you realize none of this is personal," he said. "It's just progression. Clients don't value handcrafted precision anymore. They want the label, the prestige, and we can give that quicker and cheaper." I slipped my box of tools into my bag. "Is that Preston's belief as well?" For a moment, something shifted in Reed's expression. "Preston trusts my expertise. My strategies revitalized 3 other heritage companies." "And how are those companies faring now?" I asked. "Still flourishing?" His smile tightened at the edges. "Transformation demands sacrifice. Sometimes the old must clear the path for the new." As he turned to leave, he hesitated. "By the way, your team will now answer to Elisa starting today. I've shifted your final week to administrative leave. HR will reach out regarding the exit procedures." I remained alone in my half-empty workshop, the room I had inhabited for more than 2 decades. Through the window, I watched Reed stride toward the executive wing, already chasing his next victory. What he failed to realize, what none of them realized, was that I had absolutely no intention of fading away quietly, because while Reed labeled me obsolete, he overlooked something vital about people with my background. We know where every weak spot lies. 3 days into my administrative leave, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by newspaper cutouts, old company bulletins, and notes I'd kept over 23 years. My hands worked steadily, arranging information while my mind mapped out possibilities. My phone buzzed with yet another message from my former team. "They're destroying everything," Gina wrote, My protege for 7 years. The machine shredded a limited edition hide yesterday. $500,000 gone. I placed the phone face down without replying. Gina had stayed silent during my public humiliation. So had all of them. The doorbell chimed. Through the peephole, I saw Eleanor, the company's HR director, standing on my porch with a leather portfolio, the same one I'd handcrafted for executive gifts 5 years earlier. "Willa," she said as I opened the door, "I brought your severance documents." Her eyes slid away as she stepped inside. Eleanor had been with the company nearly as long as I had. We used to share lunch every Wednesday. "Tea?" I offered, my voice deliberately steady. "I can't stay," she said, placing the portfolio on my counter. "Everything's outlined inside. The separation agreement needs your signature by Friday." I nodded but didn't touch the portfolio. "How are things going?" Eleanor hesitated, conflict flickering across her face. "Difficult. Reed's moving quickly. The board seems thrilled with the projected numbers and the supposed quality improvements. There's a learning curve," she added cautiously. "Preston believes it'll settle." "Preston hasn't stepped onto the workshop floor in years," I said. "Has he actually inspected the new products?" Eleanor twisted her bracelet nervously. "Look, I shouldn't say this, but there's an emergency meeting tomorrow. The Miyamoto order was finished using the new process, and they've rejected the entire shipment. It's a 7-figure loss." I kept my face calm, though inside a small flame sparked to life. The Miyamoto family had been clients for 3 generations. Their standards were uncompromising. "I'm sorry to hear that." Eleanor moved toward the door, then hesitated. "Reed is accusing your team. Claims they've been sabotaging the transition." The flame inside me grew hotter. "My team wouldn't need to sabotage anything. The machines can't replicate our work." "Maybe," Eleanor said quietly. "But Reed has convinced Preston this is simple resistance to progress. Anyone who speaks up gets branded as difficult." After she left, I opened the portfolio. The severance was laughably small. 6 weeks' pay for 23 years. The agreement included a non-disparagement clause and a restriction against joining competitors for 2 years. They wanted me muted and sidelined. That evening, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Xavier, the founder's son and the board's nominal chairman. At 65, he had his father's keen eyes but none of his vision. He'd been mostly absent from operations for years, devoting himself instead to his yachts and his third wife. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice carrying a faint quiver, whether from age or unease, I couldn't tell. I guided him to my living room, where he eased himself into an armchair with a soft grunt. "I'll be straightforward," Xavier began. "Things haven't been going well since you left." "It's been 3 days," I replied. 3 extremely costly days. He leaned forward. "The Miyamoto rejection is only the start. 2 other major clients are threatening to cancel standing contracts." I waited, offering no response. "Reed insists it's temporary," Xavier went on. "But I'm not convinced. My father always said you were the soul of our craftsmanship." "Your father has been gone for 12 years," I said calmly. "And during that time, you've slashed our quality control budget year after year while demanding higher output." Xavier recoiled slightly. "Business realities were handled without sacrificing our standards." "Until Reed," I interrupted. "Yes. Well?" Xavier cleared his throat. "That's why I'm here. We want you to return as a consultant to help steady this transition." I examined his face. Xavier had never once visited my workshop, had never learned a single artisan's name. Yet now he sat in my living room asking for assistance. "What does Reed think of this idea?" Xavier's hesitation said everything. "Reed doesn't know I'm here. He's certain his strategy is correct, and Preston backs him, but I have doubts. So, I'd be supporting the man who publicly humiliated me while holding no real authority." You'd be protecting your legacy, Xavier argued. And if things improve, who knows what might happen to Reed's position? I rose, signaling the end of the talk. I'll think about it. After Xavier left, I returned to my kitchen table and the documents spread across it. His visit confirmed what I already suspected. Reed's grand plan was already cracking, but returning as a powerless consultant wasn't my strategy. That night, a text arrived from an unknown number. The archive has been cleared out. All designs scanned, originals headed to storage. Thought you'd want to know. I smiled for the first time in days. The pieces were shifting. What Reed and Preston couldn't grasp was that the company's true value wasn't the products themselves. It was the knowledge behind them. Knowledge stored in the hands and minds of artisans like me. Knowledge that couldn't be automated or converted into data. Knowledge that, over 23 years, I had meticulously documented in ways only I could access. The next morning, I called Preston's assistant and requested a meeting with the CEO. Not next week, not tomorrow, today. My silence had run its course. Preston's assistant booked me for 4:30 p.m. The dead zone between afternoon meetings and evening obligations. A slot reserved for matters deemed necessary but not urgent. I arrived at headquarters 20 minutes early, pausing in the lobby where my designs rested in glass cases. Pieces that had defined luxury for over 2 decades. As I checked in with security, a group of younger employees walked by, offering me uneasy glances. Word travels quickly. Willa, Preston said from behind his desk, not bothering to rise. I didn't expect to see you again so soon. At 58, Preston had climbed from sales director to CEO over 15 years, riding on the company's success, the same success artisans like me had forged. He'd once been my ally, before quarterly targets became his obsession. I'm surprised Xavier didn't tell you about our discussion, I said as I sat. Preston's eyebrows lifted. Xavier met with you? Interesting? The Miyamoto rejection rattled him. A small setback. Preston dismissed with a flick of his hand. Reed already made adjustments to the workflow. I nodded. That's actually why I came. I've been considering ways to ease this transition. For 30 minutes, I laid out a compromise. Maintain a small team of master artisans for special commissions, while gradually integrating automation for standard product lines. Preston listened, occasionally jotting notes. Your plan has potential, he finally said. But it conflicts with Reed's blueprint for full modernization. Reed's blueprint is losing you clients, I replied. Miyamoto isn't an isolated incident. Preston's face tightened. Reed sat down across from me, exhaling sharply as if he'd been holding his breath all morning. I'll be frank, he began, sliding a crisp folder between us. The Larson situation has created unnecessary complications. The CEO is concerned about optics, clients questioning our transition, legacy buyers resisting modernization. His words were polished, but his fingers drummed against the table, betraying the panic beneath. To avoid further disruption, we're offering you a specialized contract, he continued. You'll handle legacy commissions only, limited scope, limited access, strict oversight. I opened the folder. 3 pages, clinical, impersonal, a lifetime of mastery reduced to bullet points. This is what you think I'm worth? I asked quietly. He straightened. It's more than fair. You remain connected to the brand, we maintain client loyalty, and you don't interfere with the new direction. The word interfere hung in the air like a slap. I closed the folder slowly, deliberately. Reed, I said, meeting his gaze. You brought in machines to replace hands like mine. But those machines can't save you from the mistakes you don't even know you're making. His expression flickered. Fear, then annoyance, then something dangerously close to desperation. Eleanor had mentioned the Larson Commission. Yes, Reed replied, leaning in slightly. It appears there was some confusion regarding Mr. Elson's expectations. Not confusion, I corrected calmly. A failure to grasp what genuine craftsmanship requires. Reed's smile stiffened. Regardless, Mr. Larson is a valuable client, which brings me to my proposal. The offer was precisely what Gina had warned me about, a constrained contract role for legacy clients who explicitly requested my work. The hourly pay was reasonable, but the restrictions were suffocating. I would be barred from the main workshop, cut off from my former team, and every design would become company property. You'd work from a private studio we're preparing, Reed explained, with full surveillance naturally, for quality assurance. Naturally, I echoed, and my responsibilities limited to these select commissions. Exactly, Reed confirmed. Over time, even these clients will shift to our updated systems, but for now, this arrangement benefits all parties. I studied his features, noting the strain around his eyes. This wasn't triumph, it was containment. And if I decline? Then we respect your choice, he replied smoothly. Though I should mention Mr. Larson was extremely firm, he's threatened to voice his displeasure to other long-standing clients. The message was unmistakable. Return under their conditions, or be blamed for losing prestige accounts. I'll need time to think, I said. Of course, Reed nodded. But we'll need your decision by tomorrow. Mr. Larson's anniversary deadline is approaching, and we've already promised delivery. As I headed for the door, Reed added, one more thing. During your consultation, confidentiality will be essential. No discussing our updated production methods with clients. You want me to pretend nothing has changed? We want you to stay focused on your specific tasks, he clarified. The broader company direction is no longer your concern. I nodded slowly. I understand perfectly. That evening, as dusk settled over my street, I sat on my porch watching lightning flash along the horizon. A storm was building. My phone filled with messages from former coworkers, each hinting at worsening conditions inside the company, escalating quality issues, increasing client complaints, Reed's temper unraveling. I ignored them all. Instead, I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Willa, came a gravelly voice. Been a long time. Hello, Bernard, I said. I think it's time we had that discussion you've been waiting for. Bernard Laurent had tried to recruit me to his competing firm for more than a decade, each offer more tempting than the last. I'm listening, he said, unmistakable surprise coloring his tone. Not over the phone, I replied, and I have conditions. As we arranged to meet, thunder rolled closer. The storm was arriving sooner than anyone expected. Much like my plan. Our meeting took place at a small cafe 20 meters from the company headquarters. At 70, Bernard still possessed the sharp attention to detail that made him a respected figure in the luxury market. So, he said, after our greetings, you've finally chosen to join me? I lifted my cup. Not exactly. Bernard's thick eyebrows arched. Then why summon me? I'm launching my own atelier, I said, and I need your support. For nearly an hour, I laid out my vision, an intimate studio fully devoted to authentic craftsmanship, not assembly line production masquerading as luxury, but real artistry. Bernard listened, occasionally posing incisive questions about funding, logistics, and above all, clients. You'll require serious capital, he noted, and challenging your former employer won't be simple. I'm not trying to compete with them, I replied. I intend to outlast them. Bernard observed me for a long moment. You know something. It wasn't a question. I know many things, I said, including how Reed's modernization is driving away our most loyal clients. And you're prepared to wait for the collapse? I'm prepared to be ready when it arrives, I corrected. Bernard leaned back, drumming his fingers lightly on the table. "What exactly are you asking of me?" "Workspace, suppliers, and your promise not to poach my clients once I secure them." "Bold to assume you'll secure any," he challenged. I reached into my bag and set a small notebook before him. "This holds confirmations from 12 clients who will follow me wherever I go, Miyamoto and Larson included." Bernard's eyes widened as he scanned the list. "These represent nearly 40% of your former company's custom orders." 43%, I corrected. "I've been their primary point of contact for years. Many don't even remember the company's name. They remember me. And my non-compete only restricts working for competitors," I added. "Not founding my own atelier." Bernard shut the notebook, a slow smile spreading across his lined face. "You've planned this far longer than they suspect." The next morning, I phoned Reed and declined his offer. His reaction was instant. "You're making a grave mistake," he warned. "This industry is evolving. There won't be room for artisans like you much longer." "Maybe," I replied. "But the future isn't my concern right now. I'm focused on Mr. Larson's anniversary gift. It's due in 3 weeks, isn't it?" Reed's brief silence confirmed I was correct. "We'll handle it," he said stiffly. "I'm sure you will," I replied. "Give Preston my regards." 2 days later, I signed the lease for a modest workshop Bernard had helped me secure. It was smaller than my old studio, but filled with natural light, ideal for precise handwork. I spent the week preparing the space, ordering supplies, and creating my new business cards, which read simply, "Willa Artisan." On the 8th day after leaving the company, the first call arrived. "Is this Willa?" The voice belonged to Mrs. Hawthorne, a client of 15 years. "It is." "They told me you'd retired," she said, irritation evident. "But my assistant learned you've opened your own studio. I'd like to commission a piece." By week's end, I had appointments with 7 long-term clients. None had been informed I'd left. They'd been told I was unavailable or assigned elsewhere. Meanwhile, my former colleagues updated me on conditions inside the company. Reed's machines continued producing flawed work. The remaining artisans were accused of sabotage whenever they pointed out defects. Client complaints surged. Gina called on a Sunday night, her voice low. "There's an emergency board meeting tomorrow. The Larson piece was delivered yesterday, and it was rejected again." Mr. Larson went straight to Preston. He threatened to contact business journalists about the company's misleading quality claims. "It's chaos here, Willa." I thanked her, then spent the evening preparing for the next phase. The following afternoon, Eleanor called. "The board wants to meet with you," she said, her tone carrying the fatigue of someone trapped in a corporate storm. "Tomorrow morning." "About what?" They didn't explain, but Xavier was there, and he insisted you be contacted. I agreed to attend, then phoned Bernard to update him. "Be cautious," he warned. "They might present you with a tempting offer, or they might try to pressure you about client relationships. Either way, I'm in a stronger position than they realize," I said. The clients reached out on their own. The board meeting was set for 10 a.m. in the company's main conference room, the same room where Reed had humiliated me weeks earlier. I dressed with intention, wearing a handcrafted ensemble that subtly showcased techniques distinct to my work. A quiet declaration of worth. The room fell silent when I entered. Around the long mahogany table sat the 9 board members, Xavier among them. Preston held the chair at the head, Reed seated stiffly at his right, a portfolio open before him. Their expressions ranged from anxious to openly hostile. "Thank you for coming, Willa," Preston began. "We need to discuss a few concerns that have arisen since your departure." I took the empty seat directly across from Reed. "What concerns exactly?" Xavier cleared his throat. "Several of our top clients have voiced dissatisfaction with recent commissions. Some have canceled long-standing orders." That is unfortunate, I said evenly. Reed leaned forward. We believe you've been contacting these clients directly, criticizing our updated production methods. I haven't contacted anyone, I replied honestly. They sought me out. Sought you out? Preston interrupted. How would they even know you'd left? Possibly when their calls specifically for me went unanswered, I suggested. Or when they received machine-made products after years of genuine handwork. Reed's face reddened. The quality issues are temporary. The quality issues are fundamental, I corrected. You can't automate what takes 20 years to master. A heavy silence settled over the table. Xavier finally spoke. The board has reviewed this situation extensively. We believe a recalibration of our strategy may be required. Preston shifted uneasily. What Xavier is implying is that we're considering preserving a small artisan division for select clients while continuing modernization elsewhere. And you want me to run this division? I asked flatly. Yes, Xavier confirmed. With proper authority and compensation, of course. I looked slowly at each face around the table. Most couldn't meet my gaze. I'm afraid that won't be possible, I said. I've established my own studio. Reed's laugh was sharp, almost incredulous. A small workshop can't compete with our infrastructure. I don't need to compete, I replied. I only need to serve my clients. Your clients? Reed's voice rose. They are company clients. Your contact with them was as a company representative. I smiled for the first time. Actually, that's not entirely correct. I opened my bag and pulled out a bound document, sliding it across the table to Preston. What's this? He asked, flipping through the pages. My original employment contract, I said. Along with every amendment over 23 years. You'll notice Section 12, Paragraph 3, specifically addresses client relationships. Preston found the page, his expression shifting as he read. For master artisans, I continued, client relationships developed through personal craftsmanship remain the intellectual property of the artisan, not the company. This clause was created by the founder to ensure artisans were motivated to develop long-term client loyalty. Xavier leaned forward. Is this accurate? Preston nodded slowly. It appears to be, though this clause hasn't been included in contracts for at least 15 years. But it was in mine, I said, and never amended. Reed snatched the contract, scanning it with mounting alarm. This is an oversight, clearly not intended to... It's legally binding, interrupted the company's legal counsel, who had been silent until now. I reviewed these documents when Miss Willa's severance was prepared. The clause is valid. The revelation hung heavy. I had not stolen clients. I had retained relationships that legally belonged to me. Furthermore, I continued, I've never disparaged the company. I simply informed clients who contacted me that I now work independently. Preston closed his eyes briefly. How many? 17 so far, I said. Representing approximately 60% of your custom order revenue. The figure sent a visible shock through the room. Reed's face had gone from flushed to pale. This is unacceptable, he stammered. I will pursue legal action. On what grounds? I interrupted. I've violated no agreements. I've merely exercised rights preserved in my contract. Xavier turned to Preston. We need to discuss this privately. Preston nodded, then addressed me. Willa, would you mind stepping out while we confer? I gathered my belongings and walked to the door, then paused. There's something else you should know. All eyes turned to me. The techniques I developed over 23 years, the proprietary methods that made our products unique, those belong to me as well. Section 14, Paragraph 7. Techniques and methods developed by master artisans remain the intellectual property of said artisans unless specifically commissioned and documented by the company. Reed jumped to his feet. That's absurd. You developed those techniques while employed here. I did, I agreed, but the company never documented them as required by the contract. In fact, I added, Reed recently had all my handwritten notes digitized, and the originals placed in storage without proper documentation of ownership. The legal counsel closed his eyes, confirming my interpretation in silence. I opened the door. I'll wait outside. 40 minutes later, Xavier emerged. We'd like to continue this conversation, he said. Perhaps over lunch. The board had reached a decision. They would not pursue legal action against me, recognizing it would only damage their reputation with elite clients. Instead, they proposed a partnership. My new atelier would become an exclusive high-end division of the company, operating independently, but under their umbrella. Reed was notably absent from lunch. By dessert, I learned he had been placed on administrative leave pending review. The board has concerns about his approach, Xavier explained carefully, and about certain representations he made regarding client retention. I declined their partnership offer. I prefer true independence, I told them, but I'm open to a limited collaboration on specific projects. We eventually negotiated an arrangement where I would accept select commissions requiring resources beyond my new studio's capacity. The company would provide materials and infrastructure. I would provide the craftsmanship and client relationship management. 1 week later, Reed was officially removed from his position. The press release cited strategic differences as the reason for his departure. 2 days after that, I received a text from Eleanor. Modernization cost the company $12.8 million in lost orders and rejected merchandise. Your legal contract just saved your legacy and possibly the company. 6 months later, my small atelier was thriving. I had hired 2 apprentices and was teaching them techniques that had taken me decades to perfect. Several former colleagues reached out about joining me, including Gina. I considered each request carefully, remembering their silence during my public humiliation. Bernard visited my studio on a crisp autumn morning. "You've created something remarkable here," he observed, examining a piece I was finishing for Mrs. Hawthorne. "I created nothing new," I corrected. "I preserved something valuable and dismantled Reed's career in the process," Bernard added with a sly smile. I set down my tools. Reed destroyed his own career by devaluing what he didn't understand. Bernard nodded thoughtfully. The oldest lesson in business: never underestimate what appears obsolete to your untrained eye. As I look back, I realize my story isn't really about revenge. It's about value. The value of expertise, patience, tradition. Reed saw me as obsolete because he couldn't see the worth in decades of perfection. His mistake wasn't modernization, it was dismissing the foundation that made the company successful in the first place. If you've ever been undervalued or pushed aside for the new and improved, I hope my story reminds you. True quality endures. Experience matters. Craftsmanship matters. And sometimes the most powerful response to being called obsolete isn't loud resistance. It's quietly proving your lasting value. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of resilience and reinvention. Share in the comments a time when you were underestimated and how you proved your worth. Because in a world obsessed with the new, there is profound power in honoring what endures.